Cool opportunity to catch up with Scott Pye, chat about life before supercars. You, like so many, Scott, had that chance to go overseas and explore what you might be good at. And how was that time for you? I imagine as a very young guy moving to England.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun to reminisce and have a chat about it. But like you said, many of us gave it a shot to go over there, over to Europe or America, wherever your choice was, and try and reach, I guess, the pinnacle in open wheelers. That's usually, the dream is to reach Formula One or IndyCar, and then touring car options are kind of after that, whether it's DTM or Australian touring cars. And for me, Formula One was always my dream. From 7 or 8 years old, as early as I can remember, watching Damon Hill and the '96 battle with him was just something that got me hooked on motorsport. I was just starting out in karting, and I guess that's where the dream began. It was like, okay, Formula One, that's what I want to do. And then, I moved to Europe and tried to get there. Didn't quite get there, fell short, come back here to Australia, and now I'm racing in the best touring car championship in the world. So it's funny how it all worked out. And in hindsight, I mean, I actually, to be honest, supercars is something that, had I known just how much fun racing these cars would be, I probably would have aspired to do that in the first place. But having gone to Europe, the experience that was gained, the amount I grew up in that period as well, and also like tough times, not having something, not reaching that goal is something you have to deal with, and then you move on. And so I think for me, it's a great experience. And I'm now in supercars, I think, as a better driver.
You first made the move to Formula Ford, which is a little bit different over there, because not too many kids graduate out of Formula Ford in Australia and do more of it over there. So what was the sort of thinking behind that?
I guess it was just budget, really, was the big thing. So for me, a lot of the, if you have enough money, really, you leave karting here in Australia and you go over and you either finish in the World Championships over there in karting, and then you move into a junior formula, whether that is Formula 3 or something similar. And for me, or Formula Renault was probably what would be the logical step out of karting. We didn't have the budget to move to Europe at that young of an age, and I was really fortunate here where I got sponsorship and was selected for the Cairns Rising Star Foundation, which was really the turning point in my career. I was at the back end of karting, got nominated for this scholarship, which was just an amazing opportunity, and that catapulted me into Formula Ford. So I guess through circumstances, with budget and things, that meant that staying here was kind of what I was going to do, what I was destined to be doing. But the Formula Ford opportunity came about through that scholarship, and was able to secure some sponsorship. I had a good time doing that, and got some great results, which then snowballed, I guess, but got people on the back of my success to support me, and I was able to go on to do other things after that.
What were the living conditions like for you when you first went over there? Did you find it a bit of a culture shock when you sort of went to cold, dreary little England? Yeah,
the first time I landed in the UK, I remember my phone had died on the plane, and I had to get to Shenfield, which is where my manager lived at the time, and I got that wrong with Sheffield. If I remember correctly, Sheffield's north and Shenfield's south, and I got on the wrong train. It was my first experience. Realised that like an hour into the train. I'm like, oh my God, I'm pretty sure I've got this wrong. And so then anyway, I asked for some help. Turns out Shenfield was the opposite direction, switched trains, and that was kind of my first experience of like diving in the deep end. And I guess realising that I was somewhat on my own. Like I knew one person there, which was Perry, who was my manager at the time, and really until I got to him, it didn't really start to hit a rhythm. He really made the transition into living over there much easier. I lived at his house for a while before I got on my own feet, but sponsorship was the restricting, I guess it was quite restricting on what I could do. When we went over, I didn't have much money, so getting accommodation and things was difficult. So I housed with him, pretty much carpooled with anyone that I could to and from races, and then I got, my first car was a Peugeot 106 in orange. It was terrible. I think it was like £400 or something like that. But it did me the whole year, and luckily I won the Formula Ford Championship, so I got a free car. So for me, that was the coolest thing ever. But yeah, it is definitely a culture shock, but it was definitely something I kind of went in open-minded. I knew it was going to have its challenges, but I was quite excited about it. Myself and my dad always had the dream of trying to reach Formula One, and that always meant moving to the UK. When he passed in 2009, I kind of decided, like, no matter what, I'm leaving in 2010 to the UK, and I'm going to give it everything I've got. So I started ringing anyone I possibly could. That's when I reached out to Perry over in the UK, and we put together a program that allowed me to go over. So the challenges that I was going to be faced with, I was just prepared to embrace them and have the time of my life and give it my best possible shot to reach what my dream was for as long as I could remember.
It must have been pretty raw moving away from the family after just losing your dad so recently as well. Did that play on your mind a little bit when you were overseas?
It did a little bit. I guess it did play on my mind a little bit, but probably in a positive way. You know, any time I was having a hard time, it was always quite a motivating factor to remember why I was doing it. And I think that's always important, to have good reason behind whatever you're doing. So for me, I never doubted the decision. I never really got homesick because there's nowhere else I wanted to be. That was it. So I was living my dream, so to speak.
When did you and Roland Dane first connect? How did Roland sort of play into the early days of your development?
Yeah, Roland first was a sponsor. So when I was in the Cam's Rising Star program, I went to Adelaide and did a speech there where we did it to a bunch of the supporters of that program that donated to the foundation, to the scholarship, and Roland was the guest speaker. So that was my first opportunity meeting him. I believe it was the beginning of 2009. He interviewed me. I did the Q&A with me, and when we finished, I asked if I could add him to my mailing list on Hotmail and send him all my race reports, and I guess give me a way that I could just hassle him with my reports and see if he'd be, interested in building a relationship there that maybe I could, leverage into the future. I guess I was a young guy looking for any opportunity possible, and meeting Roland at the time was a great opportunity. So he was kind enough, gave me his email, and I hassled him for the entire year of 2009. And I was pretty clear as well with what my intention was. When Dad passed, pretty much reached out and said, this is what my goal is in the next 9 months. I want to get over. The first step was doing the Formula Ford Festival. And I actually originally asked him if I could not ask for sponsorship, but ask if his commercial department could help me find sponsorship. So, and he was, amazing. He came forward with sponsorship along with a bunch of others that made that first trip over there possible. We had a great event, great round, and after that, he came on board as a sponsor in 2010. But Roland is one of those people who were key members, I guess, of key parts to my success. There was a few of them really that made it happen, and the scholarship was the first group of people really that got behind me and helped make that happen. Race got another one in the mount, and then Visa Global Logistics, who still sponsor me now with Simon R, which is people that I just couldn't thank enough. There's those few that helped make it happen.
It wasn't just Europe. You had a crack at the Toyota Racing Series in New Zealand, which is an awesome category full of stars. Who are some of the faster blokes that you come up against, and you must see them racing all around the world now and think, wow, it's pretty cool to race and beat some of those guys?
The Toyota Racing Series was actually, to be honest, that was the real turning point, I think, in my career. I got a phone call from Trev Schumack, who is a Michelin importer here in Australia, and he called me up when I was in Tasmania and asked if I wanted to come and drive for him in the New Zealand Toyota Racing Series, and that was owned at the time. That team was owned by Visa Global Logistics. So I went over, drove their car, and met Simon, who owned the company, and that relationship is what that sponsorship, I guess, in the early days, put me through Formula Ford in the UK, moved me into Formula 3. Manages me today. So it's, from 2009, that one phone call from Trev changed, I think, the whole trajectory of my career, which was amazing. So Toyota Racing Series holds a close, part in my heart, I guess, in terms of, my career. And the guys we got to race were world class. There was a few really good young guns at the time. I remember Danny Kvyat was one, and he was tiny. I think he was like 14 or 15 years old. But yeah, he was a gun. Obviously, Mitch Evans was another one who, there's plenty of Kiwis, of course, that did well with Nick Cassidy. But there was a few F1 drivers that, became F1 drivers later, but they were the young guns at the time when I went over there.
Were you happy with the way that things wrapped up in Europe? A lot of people look back at it and go, gee, it was such a sorry moment when I had to come home. Or did you feel like you were ready to come home at that point?
Yeah, I think I was ready to come home. I mean, I would have loved to have stayed over there, but at the end of the day, I think it's not worth doing something unless you can do it properly. And we just, you have to be realistic. And I didn't have the budget behind me to have a proper assault on a program over there. And I remember Roland started managing me 2011, halfway through that year. I had a fallout with my manager at the time, and I found out on the Monday after the event we had the fallout out that I owed £60,000 to the race team I was driving for, which I was unaware of. I thought we were up to date. So there was a really difficult period there where I had to reach out to Roland and Simon, the other partner of mine who was helping me out, and explained the situation, and they kind of saved the day. Roland flew over to the UK, and we planned out the remainder of the season, and they covered the money owing as well, which meant I finished 2011 pretty strong. I think we finished second or third highest point scorer. But really at the end of the year, we looked at our programs and our options. We wanted to do European Formula 3 was the target, because I was actually on a 5-year contract as well with Mercedes. So I had to do one more year of Formula 3 before my 3 years in DTM started. And unfortunately, I just couldn't get the money together to do that final year of Formula 3 in the contract. So Roland gave me the opportunity to come back here in Australia and race in the Monster DVS car, which, I mean, I was pretty tapped. Trying to find money to put fuel in my road car to drive to races was hard enough, let alone find £500,000 to £1 million to go racing was just not really achievable. So Merck were amazing. They let me out of the contract. I flew to Germany, I think it was like November or December. I went over and said, look, I just cannot. I gave it as long as I possibly could to find the money to race the following year. And when that couldn't happen, I went and met with them, explained to them the situation. They were great, and I moved back to Australia, and the rest is, is history in supercars.
Awesome, buddy. Cheers for the chat.
No worries. Thanks, man.